I love the idea that there are too many people at NPR, and so the guy who's getting kicked out starts a concert at his desk. That's a way to get them. We have currently about 300 people watching online, 300 streams on the site. But we also have all of these sites around the country which have 30, 40, 50 people. We estimate that there are probably about 700 people watching right now outside of the auditorium. So it's very exciting. So our next project is nothing really so much to do with arts journalism per se, but we have to remember that the dissolution of arts journalism isn't just happening because it's the arts. It's happening across all of journalism itself. And so we went looking for interesting ways that other journalists were trying to reinvent what they do. And we found Steve Buttrey. Steve Buttrey works for Gazette Communications in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And Steve Buttrey asks, what actually is news? How do we define it? Who creates it? Who is it for? And he wrote this very interesting manifesto, which I happened to see online. It was on his blog, where he was basically blowing up the whole idea of what journalism ought to be. Not just what journalism ought to be, but what really constitutes news. And I think if we're going to have conversations about reinventing something, we have to, in a way, kind of step back and kind of look at what our definitions are. So the Gazette website, to be honest, is not the best website out there. It's not the best small town website. It's pretty good, but and it doesn't have a huge arts section. So we're not using this as an example of great arts journalism. But what does it have to say about arts journalism? Changing the definitions of news is challenge to the idea that there are clearly defined roles for journalists and critics and artists and institutions. Where is community opinion? Who gives the context? Who reports? And on what do they report? Who makes judgments, and what do those judgments mean? Whitney Houston is afraid to go out on a big tour because the first time she goes out in Central Park, she cracks a note, and suddenly the entire world knows. Now, if you've got millions of dollars riding on a big tour and suddenly your ticket sales die, you've got a problem. And blockbuster movies now, they're thought to be critic-proof. It doesn't really matter what the critics say. They have such a built-in constituency. So where actually is a critic in all of this? What is it that we've got left to do? Traditional journalism also has covered some kinds of culture very well, while other kinds of culture have been largely invisible. So we do a great job with the symphony orchestra and the art museum and all of that, but we never covered dance terribly well. We never gave a lot of space to things like jazz or community arts. There are 250,000 choruses in this country, and where do you read about that? Or little community book clubs, and how have we figured out how to do that? I think that one of the amazing possibilities in all of this is that we can think of ways to cover different areas of culture which we haven't traditionally found a good way to do. So let's listen to Steve, and he believes that reinventing the news starts with reinventing the definition of news.